blow a siren at 9 o'clock, and all the black people were supposed to go home. I wanted to do this for a long time because I knew that what we did in the 60s was significant, historical, and it needed to be recorded. So 100 years from now or 50 years from now, if we don't write this story, believe me, the people of that day will never know what happened in Enfield between 1963 and 1965. It all began in the spring of 1963 when one man, Reed Johnson, my husband, walked into the Enfield town office and informed the clerk that he wanted to run for town commissioner. Reed had graduated from Hampton. He and I were classmates at Hampton Institute. And he had taught at Tuskegee Institute, and he had also worked in at the naval base in Norfolk, Virginia. And he came from there to Enfield and joined my father in the funeral home. And that was one of the reasons we were able to stage the movement, because he worked independently. He didn't have a white employer. Johnson's filing for town commissioner awakened new interest in politics in Enfield's black neighborhoods, in Newtown, Black Bottom, and on Cemetery Hill. People talked about Johnson's filing at Rip McWilliams' barbershop and at Rosalie Cofield's and Queen Pittman's beauty salons. His bold act in a town where only a handful of Negroes could vote unleashed fears among whites and caught blacks by surprise. When he filed his as a candidate for the town commission, the town was very shocked, and people started calling our house, threatening to burn it down if he didn't withdraw from the race. And cars would pass by at night and people would yell out ugly things. My husband told me that every time they passed a service station that was run by Bobbitt, two brothers whose last name was Bobbitt, that they yelled at him and called him the N-word. And finally, one night, we were startled to see a cross burning on our back lawn.
I just remember standing at that window in your bedroom, looking outside, and seeing all the flames shooting up. I think I was 5 years old when that happened. And it looked like the cross was, to me, 50 feet tall in the sky. It looked huge. But I don't think it was quite that large. But for many years, we would go out and look at the hole in the ground that the cross left. And they actually had to dig a hole to put the cross in before they set it on fire. Which to me made me think they were out in our yard for a while, and we didn't even know it, which was even scarier.
Students became actively involved as a result of Reed's effort to run for town commissioner. It was during the time when the college sit-ins were going on, and my class was very, very interested in this particular, this area, what was happening. We had to meet in the chapel of my father's funeral home because we didn't have many places. We couldn't go to the school. The churches were not open to us.
They opened the doors of the funeral home to have meetings for the NAACP and other groups to meet. Many churches in the community did not feel comfortable doing that, and so the meetings would take place at the funeral home. People didn't know if it was a wake or a funeral or a meeting, and so they were able to
do that.
This was where we would do the movement meetings. And we did them every night during the month of June, 1963. Every night. Planned the protest for the next day, and people would talk about what happened the day before, and we would sing. We would always sing.
There was a big circle here. People singing, "We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, don't you know that I do believe we shall overcome someday."
And we said, now what are you going to do if someone calls you the N-word? And we said, you don't fight back, you just ignore them. And my friend Lily Cousins, who was standing there, who was one of the adults, she said, if they call you the N-word, you look them dead in the eye and you keep on walking. Word of the infield struggle reached John Salter, who had worked with Medgar Evers in Jackson, Mississippi. John and his Tougaloo College students had been harassed and attacked as they protested racial segregation at a lunch counter in Jackson.
Following that bloody epic, and it was bloody, I then became field organizer for a small civil rights group called the Southern Conference Educational Fund. The director of that was interested in my setting up shop in one of the Carolinas.
Supported by the Southern Conference Educational Fund, John came to Enfield and helped organize the Halifax County Voters Movement. The goal? To register the thousands of Black people in Halifax County who had been denied the right to vote. With the Halifax County Voters Movement, we did have a county-wide registration. And the figures, it was just amazing, the number of white people who were registered. Like 95% of the white people in Halifax County were registered, and something like 15% of Black people. So we had this big voter registration effort to get Black people to register and vote. They ran this slate of Black people. And there were at least 2 women in that group, but they were predominantly men. When we took people downtown to register, they were happy to go, many of them, although they were fearful.
We're hearing people say, no, I can't register because I need my job. I'm not going to do that. I have a family to support.
And some of the teachers would not participate. That was a reality check for me. I was surprised. I did not expect that. That's something that I didn't anticipate.
In the deeper South, the churches were like the backbone of the movement, and I didn't remember that being the case here. I know for a fact that a couple of the ministers were very vocal against it.
Maddie Watson, she was a cook for a family on the Inn, the Pope family. And She hesitated a bit because she could lose her job, and she was, quite up in age, but she did. So she agreed to vote, and we would take them to the polls. Many of the people who had the most well-educated people were the ones who did not want to get involved. The people who had less were the people who did.
And at that time, you had to pass a literacy test. You had to prove that you could read and write. And often they would quiz Black people who wanted to register. They would ask questions about the Constitution. They would even ask people to recite sections. They did all kinds of things to discourage Black political participation.
I heard about the stories of closing the polls, changing the hours, and the games that the white people played to dissuade us.
They moved very slowly, took forever with Black people, stretched the literacy test into something ridiculous. It was anyway.
Our side called on attorneys, and that was particularly through the efforts of John Salter. And John got in touch with lawyers, civil rights lawyers, and they came to Enfield and stayed up all night taking affidavits from people who had tried to register.
To be blunt about it, the bastards had played their little game at the polls. But we had our thing.
And then they went to Judge Larkins in Raleigh, in the Eastern District of the Federal Court. And he issued an injunction against the board. They could not take 30 minutes with one person. They had to, when there was a line, they should be doing 2 people at a time, and it should be a brief thing.
With the injunction in place, it provided that no more than 5 minutes could be spent registering somebody. If the lines got long, they had to register 2 to 4 people at a time. Some things like that. Halifax tried to twist the ruling and said it meant that if you couldn't get somebody in 5 minutes, then they can't register. Just a little twist. But we went back quickly into court and got that straightened out. Judge Larkins is really very good for a federal Southern judge.
And he told them to be reasonable and to, if there were crowds of people there, they should take more than one person at a time. They should open the books other than Saturday.
There were other things that happened a lot. Goons with guns were all around, different places. Obviously intimidating.
But we didn't stop. I could drive at that time, and I took people down there for as long as I could. I can remember in the evening, as it started to get dark, knocking on people's doors. Just so excited, as well as being quite naive about human behavior. One evening when I was driving home, I noticed a car following me. The driver made the same turns as I did. I could see white men in the car. My 16-year-old instincts told me not to lead them to my home, where they would likely harm my family. I decided to drive through the Black neighborhood so someone would see what was happening. Mm-hmm. I repeated my route through the neighborhood several times. Eventually, the Blacks began to line the streets. The men stopped following me as the crowd of Blacks grew larger on the streets. I was told later that the men had rifles and that they were visible in the car following me.
Despite the hostility of my principal, I continued to work for the Halifax County Voters Movement, canvassing for new voters, attending meetings, and teaching my students how to register and vote, so that they, in turn, could teach their parents and neighbors. We kept getting little hints that the school board, the superintendent, that they were not very happy with the participation with teachers participating in this political movement. And I found out that I was being looked at very carefully. So I knew something might happen.
The pressure came from the power that be, the school board and the people that paid his salary. I do believe that. They told him that either she goes or you go. You know? It just seemed so unfair to me because Mrs. Cofield was the best thing that that school had.
As a result of her involvement in the 1960s struggle for civil rights in her hometown, Enfield school authorities fired her. In a benchmark case, she successfully sued both the city and the county. The National Education Association estimated that her case, get this, saved the jobs of 40,000 black teachers across the South. Okay?
So there were quite a few who were very supportive. And then sometimes we don't recognize those who were behind the scene. You know, they supported their children participating.
The work that they did was a part of that national movement, the civil rights movement that had such impact on the society. Since the lawsuit and the groundbreaking work of the Halifax County Voters Movement in 1964, Enfield has elected dozens of black officials. In 1980, Charles Swindell was elected to the Board of Commissioners. And in 1986, he became Enfield's first black mayor. Kay Hardaway, Edward Jones, Warnie Bishop, and Barbara Simmons have also served as mayor of Enfield. Altogether, the town has elected an impressive slate of black men and women to govern the town of Enfield.